week, we learned about the rise of the newspaper in the 19th century and the way that advocates such as abolitionists, labor union advocates, and many people campaigning for all kinds of causes realized that the newspaper was a powerful tool. Working with journalists helped campaigners get public attention for the causes that they were working on. Journalists learned that writing stories about the human effects of social problems helped people care about problems in society. This kind of reporting was more dramatic than publishing data and statistics about problems, although they did that too. We talked about the US Muckrakers, and we touched a bit on the global Muckrakers and the stories written about human trafficking by Dwarkanath Ganguly in India. This week, we'll introduce you to some other global Muckrakers from the past century and the stories that they wrote. After reading King Leopold's Ghost, Adam Hochschild's best-selling book about the campaign against the abuses committed in the rubber trade in the Belgian Congo, I began to research 19th and 20th century newspapers from around the world. I wanted to read stories by other investigative journalists and find out who had listened to them. When did those stories have an impact? It surprised me to find out that around the world, for more than 150 years, journalists reported on the subjects that we still care about today. Things like labor abuses, trafficking of people, military and police brutality, prison conditions, corruption, famines, colonial power, conditions of women, stories about natural disasters and life in the countryside. Journalists all over the world were writing about them. In some cases, the writers weren't journalists until they witnessed an atrocity and decided they had to tell the world. That's a bit like some citizen journalists today. Benjamin Saldanha Roca in Peru and E.D. Morel, writing about the Congo, were outraged by the abuses resulting from rubber collection. They became reporters and founded newspapers in order to expose the injustices. Like today's blogs, many of these publications were not financially sustainable. And sometimes it took years for the writing to have any impact at all. But the Muckrakers carried on. They didn't always stop bad things from happening, but they raised global awareness and they spurred governments to investigate. Even when justice wasn't served immediately, intrepid muckraking reporters tried to bear witness. Sometimes they were vindicated by history. Gareth Jones is a good example. His exposure of the famine in Ukraine under Stalin in the 1930s may not have saved lives at the time, but he set the record straight for the future. So did Patricia Verdugo in Chile. She wrote a chilling account of one death squad operating in Pinochet's Chile in 1973. She was sued for libel, but her journalism, with its emphasis on hard evidence and a chronology of events, wound up becoming valuable testimony about that dark period. Later on, investigators used her work to establish the facts of what had happened. Why is it that sometimes global muckraking has an impact and other times not? The question of what it takes to get the world's attention is something we'll think about this week. We will try to understand the characteristics of reporting that has an impact. We saw that economist Alexander Dyke spoke about the effect of naming and shaming on corporate behavior. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. This is also true of governments. When a government is accountable to its people and cares about public opinion or international opinion, then muckraking can make a difference. But when there are enormous social problems and a lot of money at stake, it takes more than just a few articles to bring about change. After Dwarkanath Ganguly exposed the conditions of the workers on the Assam tea plantations, public awareness was raised, but conditions did not dramatically improve. Labor abuses remained. There are other examples. E.D. Morel wrote about conditions in the Congo under King Leopold, and Henry Wooden Nevinson wrote about labor conditions in the cocoa plantations that supplied cocoa to the Cadbury Chocolate Company. They raised awareness, and global campaigns arose about the conditions in the Congo, Amazon, and other parts of Africa, but the abuses they exposed remained intractable. We'll also look at a piece of journalism that did have an immediate impact. Ian Stevens' reporting on the 1943 famine in Bengal, India. Stevens, the editor of The Statesman, a well-known English-language newspaper in Calcutta, published reports about the terrible famine at a time when much of the Indian press was subject to wartime censorship. His reporting embarrassed the government of India and pushed them to allow emergency food and relief supplies to be delivered to the famine victims. We'll learn more about Ian Stevens this week. Finally, we will look at what we can learn from the examples of global muckrakers about when their work has an impact and when it doesn't. As you hear their stories, let's think about that.